Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is actually a recurring guest, is Kevin Bonfield. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Adi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm honored to be back for a second time. That must mean that my first time was pretty good.
It was amazing. We had a great conversation, and now we're going to take it to the next level with the next subject. So first of all, I'm going to include the conversation, our previous conversation in the show notes, so people will know what you do. And that was more of, we had an overview of the ways that you help clients. And today we're going to talk specifically also the way you help clients, but it has to do with ERP systems, which is definitely a subject that I get a lot of questions about. You know, we help clients document the processes and the workflows that lead to it, but there is so much more about it that I thought it'd be great to have that conversation so our listeners could hear and apply. But Kevin, before that, let me do a little bit more of an intro and read your bio, and then we're going to hear more about your company and we'll get into our conversation. So you work with clients to address complex business and technology issues through setting clear strategic roadmaps and driving execution and scaling. So you bring over 25 years of consulting and technology operations experience to ensure strategy delivers results.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that in this particular context, as we're talking about ERP systems, that there is definitely a strategic piece, like where is your company going? How is this ERP system going to help? And then there's how are we going to make it work in the company and make sure that it delivers the results that were expected on the front end. So yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start. ERP. What will lead a company to want to change their ERP system?
There's typically two reasons why, at a macro level, there's two reasons why you would want to change your ERP system. One is that the system that you're using at the moment, and when we talk about ERP systems, that's enterprise resource planning. It can mean a number of things, but it's typically you've got core operational systems that are connected to financials, and it's the lifeblood of how a company operates, right? It's the technology backbone for that company. And so there are two reasons that you would want to change. One is that your current system is not fit for purpose. And it might be that if you've got an industry-specific ERP, it's going away, or it's focused on a different segment of the market that you're in. And so for you to be able to proceed and go and win in the future, you need something that's going to grow with your business. And that's not the case. Or the other is that you're looking for a new set of abilities, capabilities, and this ERP system is going to help you get there. And when I say new capabilities, I'm thinking about it as much from a business perspective. We want to be able to do this. We want to be able to operate in multiple countries. We want to be able to have new product lines. We want to be able to communicate with our customers in a different way. And our current system doesn't allow us to do that. And so those are the two big reasons why you might want to change. You're either, I suppose, running away from one, or you're running towards another.
Right. So it's a big endeavor. I mean, it is a big thing to start change from one ERP to another. So what will be your recommendations? What will be some of the steps that a company should take or needs to take in order to transform from one to another?
Well, the starting point is understanding what your strategy is and how this ERP change is going to help you get there. So what does success look like? when you get to the end of this implementation, what are you going to be able to do that you cannot do today? Or what do you want to be able to do in the future that you're going to be able to do so much better than you can today? And so defining that success is a key element of it. The second is, given that you understand that success, which ERP system is best suited to you? So in some cases, it could be that an industry-specific ERP is the right path, that there are so many specific things that industry needs that going down an industry-specific route is important. Or you're looking for the broader capabilities of a more generic system, and that would be able to give you the pieces that you need to be able to win in the future. So the second phase is, what's the ERP system that you're looking for? And then the third is, okay, how am I going to make this transition from current state to future state? But what I will say is that one of the biggest issues here is that a lot of clients that I see think that this is a technology change. We have this technology and we're going to have that technology. So it's a change in the way that we operate within our technology team, and they need to go and manage this. It couldn't be further from the truth. The vast majority of these changes are business changes where you are changing the way that you operate, your processes, how you interact with your customers. And so you have to think about it as this is a massive business change. It's not cleaning up a cut that you have on your arm or putting a Band-Aid on. This is open heart surgery, and you need to treat it with that kind of respect.
Right. So let's talk about the first bullet, the first point you mentioned,
right,
in terms of identifying success.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways that you can identify success as a company? Because sometimes what can happen is that you went to a trade show, you saw a new ERP system, or
right,
a salesperson contacted you and said, "Oh, this will be great for your business," and then you go, "Oh, I want those,
right,
I want those features," or it looks like,
right,
or you are frustrated the way that your current ERP is working, or it's too slow, or it just wasn't set up correctly, and you think this is the shiny new object that now I'm going to solve all my problems, right? A genie in the bottle
right.
that somehow will be magically everything will be just solved. So how often do you see companies actually go, okay, let's sit down and let's figure out the measurements of success here? And when they do, what are the actions that you take in order to figure it out?
Yeah, it's important to connect the strategy of the company to what are we thinking it's going to do in each of the functions that have been outlined. So to your point, there is a lot of, oh, I saw this in online on LinkedIn, or I was at a trade show and they gave me a quick demo and it looks so much better than the system that we're using today. Look at all of the reporting. I get to see this is what's going on with my customer and so on. But actually having the discussion about what does our business look like in the future is the starting point. So are we going to have the same number of people, the same number of locations, the same number of customers? Are they going to be buying the same things? Or are we changing those elements? Are we acquiring a company and we need to integrate them together so that I can see the things, see how operations work across my entire enterprise? Those are the kinds of conversations to talk about in terms of success for the future. And then it's worth taking a look at the different options and saying, which of these options can best help me get there?
Right. So again, in terms of defining the success, what do you recommend? I mean, how can people figure out what success looks like if the new ERP is implemented? Let's go a little bit more into details about it.
Yeah, the way that we do that is we workshop that with our clients, where we will sit down. We'll start off typically by having a series of one-on-one interviews to understand where everybody's at. What we see is that even when there is a very clear strategy that an organization has, there's often some differences of interpretation of what's most important versus second and third importance. And so bringing that, after we've done individual interviews, bringing people together to have a workshop to talk through, okay, these are the things that are most important as we look at this implementation. That's the phase that we go from talking about strategy at a generic level, to getting the core information, to getting the team aligned on these are the most important pieces that we're going to put in.
Right. Okay. So you do that, you figure out what is important, what success looks like. So there is and there is alignment to the strategy. So now the next step would be to choose the correct ERP system.
Right. And a lot of customers or a lot of clients of ours will actually go through the process of setting up an RFP, or they'll go through an RFI and an RFP. So request for information, request for proposal. If you have no idea what it is that you're looking for, a request for information is helpful, because you can send it out to a broad number of companies. They can give you enough information to kind of say, yes, this either isn't fit for purpose, or this is something that I want to go and dive into at a deeper level. And then you'll typically go and look at a request for proposal with 3 to 5 companies, and you'll lay out, this is the way that we're going to score what they do, right? So how do I track my customers? How do I communicate with my customers? Do I have issues? And this is maybe too detailed, Adi, but do I have customers of customers, right? Or do I want to think about customers as one core customer, but a whole series of locations, because I want to be able to see how that data comes together? It's that kind of information to be able to say, this is how I'm going to run my business. And you can get a view of how I'm going to rank each of these systems to be able to see how they operate, right? And of course, part of that is, how much is it going to cost? What does my implementation look like? And what's the relationship that I'm going to have with both the implementer and the company on an ongoing basis?
Right. So you help, Kevin, you work with companies and you help them make those decisions. How do you help them make the decision?
So we'll go through the RFP process, and then we'll score. This is how each of the solutions did. And then the outcome is that they have to make the decision. It'll come back and it'll be, well, this one is clearly heads and shoulders above the other two, so that's the one we're going to go with. What we tend to find at the time is that what we thought were the criteria when we laid out the rubric sometimes have different weights to them. So it's like, oh yes, we said that customer was the topics in customer were just as important as how it integrates with our financial back end. But what we find actually when we get to the answer is that there's a couple that are fairly close, and really what we need is a better customer system. So we're going to go with this one that's better on the customer side. But again, this is a business decision that's being made. This isn't our decision. We will come with a recommendation, right, that's based on the data that we've got. But ultimately, this is a decision for a client to make that says, yes, this is the right thing for our business into the future.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So step number 1 done. We have the metrics for success. Decide on the system. Now what? Is there any preparation that is needed before the system is being integrated?
Well, understanding where you're going from, where you're coming from, is a core piece of this, right? This is the beginning of the journey, and as you and I have talked about, understanding what your processes are today gives you a really good foundation for the change that's going to be required as you move forward, especially if they're ones that lead to a differentiation for you in the marketplace.
That's right. So you have to have the existing state of the processes. You also have to look at future state. How important it is to actually document the processes before you engaged in an ERP implementation program?
Well, and again, you and I have talked about this in the past. I think that it's important to do that, but there are a couple of reasons why that might be challenging, right? So one is you've acquired multiple companies, right? And so you've got, let's say you've acquired 5 companies. Now I've got, for the same process topic, I've got 6 different processes that I need to go and document. You may look at that and you may go, that is so complex, mapping the current processes and then how I'm going to get to the future state, that I'm just going to define the future state and we're going to move to it regardless of what the current state is. So that might be one of the reasons for doing it that way. The other is, what I see less of is people being really clear on the fact that these processes make a difference for the way that we operate, right? They either make us more efficient, or they deliver better customer intimacy, or they are better for our products. And so these are unique processes that we want to keep, right? Those absolutely you want to document, because you want to have them clear, and you want to make sure that they're consistently executed, and that they're executed in this new system. The way that you do, though, the way that you pay your suppliers or your vendors and your AP process, you may look at that and go, that is not a source of differentiation for us. I want consistency and efficiency. And by the way, the new system is defining that for me. And so I'm just going to move to that. I don't necessarily need to look at what it is today. I'm just going to shift my data over, and I'm going to run it using that new process.
Right. So it's really a differentiation of what is important for you to keep, and also the knowledge transfer, because you need to figure out, like, where's the knowledge. Even in the AP, there might be, like, it's a great opportunity to revisit your existing process, because there has to be also training, right? So right now you can have an AP manager that has been doing things a certain way with a certain system, where we want to capture the knowledge, the best practices, the things that you don't want to lose, because obviously it's also your relationship with the vendors and you want things to be smooth. But then you might not need to document the entire process from beginning to end, because you're going to implement a new system in place. So the old process will integrate with the new process. You just want to make sure to define what is important for you. So obviously, like with the AP, this example, your relationship with your vendors is very important. So if the part of the magic is that you call them every Monday and you tell them something, okay, well, you don't want to lose that, but that's something else. You want to make sure that you have to differentiate between the knowledge, the system, what is important, what is not. And I'm with you in terms of, like, identifying priorities, and because if you have to then start documenting everything from beginning to end, and also implement a new system, that can take a very long time.
It can. So there's a trade-off in terms of business speed, right? But the other thing is, let's take the accounts payable, as you were talking about. The thing that you don't want to miss is there are relationships that are important. So there's a significant increase, especially recently, in ransomware and phishing schemes, right, on the cybersecurity side, where you will see these emails that make it look like somebody that is reaching out and going, oh, by the way, can we please change the bank details for this particular ACH that you were going to send? Here's the new bank details. Just send that $50,000 to this new bank, right? If you miss out on that process for changing the way that you pay people, or you've got a relationship where I know that Addie wouldn't send me an email to do that. She would call me. So I'm just going to call Addie back, right? Those are the kinds of things that you want to make sure don't get lost in trying to become, more efficient. You miss out on the business relationships and some of the security of having those conversations.
Right. So it's really case by case, and you have to see what is important, what is not. You get it documented. Now you start implementing. So you signed that big contract, with the ERP company.
Right.
And Kevin, I know you help clients with that as well, in terms of analyzing what is important, what is not. So give us some tips about what do you look at?
So we look at things across five different types, and we'll have a PDF that's available. I think in the show notes, we'll make sure that that's here, that we call the hidden risks of SaaS contracts. And so I'll talk about a few of them, because they relate to things like the strategy that we talked about, but also and data that we talked about, but also about how do we make sure that the deal that you sign is lined up to what's most important for you. So one, for instance, is making sure that your licensing metrics are lined up, right? That you are buying the right number of licenses at the right level, that you're not paying too much. And we see it in a couple of different ways. Either you get a block of licenses and you think that your company's, let's say I get a block of 100 licenses, and I say, well, this is a 5-year deal and I need 80 today, but I'm going to grow over time. So, I should get to 100, right? Rather than thinking about what's the right level of the number of licenses. Or actually, as part of this ERP change that I'm going through, Today, everybody has a purchasing license, as an example. There are usually different types of license. Everybody has a purchasing license, and I want to centralize the way that I do procurement. And so I don't need all of those purchasing licenses because I'm going to have a core team of 10 who's going to do it. I need 10 licenses. And then part of my change management is that I'm going to change the way that I do procurement for the future. So lining up your licenses to what your business is one of the first steps. And the key part is, when you're negotiating with a software vendor, they will always accept you saying, I want to spend more money. And it's almost impossible to say, I want to spend less money. So it's better to come in on the low end and then move up rather than start on the high end and then struggle to move it back down again.
Right. And that is something also that is very important to know and understand when you're going over the contract. And that's obviously
Right.
compliance with that.
Right.
For sure. How long does an integration usually takes, if there is a usual?
I don't think that there's a usual. Look, what I will say is that there's different ways of thinking about integration, right? One is if we've got clarity on what success is, then also being clear on what the first deployment looks like is of critical importance. We talk about MVP, right? Minimum viable product. This is not that, but there is something which is what's the base implementation that we're going to do that is going to allow us to run our business. And there are different views on this, right? One is let's move as quickly as we can to this base implementation, and then we'll kind of clean it up as we go, because now we're using it and we're getting comfortable with it so we can see where our issues are. There's another path, which is we're actually going to implement where we're essentially doing similar sets of things as we're doing today, maybe with one or two more capabilities that we're applying, but we want to make sure that those are clearly done. We've tested them. We've maybe piloted them in one division or one location to make sure that it works, and then we move on from there. So it's really a question, Adi, of your desire for speed and your risk tolerance as to which path you go down. And I've seen clients do it at both ends.
Right. That's exactly right. Me too. So how important is to actually have a person, a point person, or a person dedicated for that integration internally, not a software person, but a person internally?
I think you need two people who are living this on a day-to-day basis. There's the technology person who's making sure that the configuration and the integrations are happening, right? So is the technology happening? And I think you need a business person who is saying, are we getting the outcomes that we expected to happen? Process, revenue, cost reduction, whatever it is. And those two people should be joined at the hip for the time that it takes to go through this process. It's rare. It's not impossible, but it's rare that you have somebody who can manage both, that has enough of a view of the business and the technology that they can specialize in both. And quite frankly, there's so much going on both sides that having a couple of people is important. And I know for some, they will say, it's so much better to have one throat to choke. Yes, being clear on what these people's responsibilities are is important. But there are two different skill sets, and being clear on what that outcome looks like and getting those people to work together, I think leads to the best outcomes.
Absolutely. Kevin, this has been a fantastic conversation. Is there anything else that I did not ask you that businesses need to know when they are changing or implementing a new ERP system?
Look, I think that, we've talked a lot about the process and the challenges of going through this. But what I would also say is for companies that do this well, it can be a painful process, but you're unlocking performance for the future that you just don't have today, right? You're essentially setting your company up for success into the future. And so these can be, challenging phases to go through. But when you get to the other side, you're going to look back and you're going to go, yes, we're in a better position now. We can go and compete harder. We can go and deliver for our customers at a higher level than we have in the past. And so it was worth going and doing this so that we can achieve those outcomes.
Absolutely. And that's why starting with the outcomes, it's so important. I mean, this is the same thing for a process documentation project. That's why I always talk about the goal and what success looks like and why are we doing it. And you have to be convinced that without it, you're not going to get the same outcomes, right? So you need to know that without having the new ERP system, there is no way that you're going to achieve those goals that you want. And as you said, it is aligned, if it's aligned to the strategy, and this is really what you want, you have the goal, you have the correct strategy, then implementing that ERP system is the right thing to do.
Right, exactly right.
Awesome. Kevin, it's been great having you on this podcast again. You're probably going to be here again because we come up with more topics to talk about. And it's interesting, and you have your own podcast where you have different topics that you talk about, right? A series, because sometimes it's a series of things that would educate entrepreneurs, business owners about certain things, and it takes more than one time to discuss all those topics. Yeah. So if people want to know more about you or want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way is through my email, which is kevin.bonfield@concentre.net. And Concentre is CONCENTRE.net. It's obviously RE because I'm British, right? Otherwise, I would have spelled it ER. So kevin.bonfield@concentre.net.
Fantastic. Okay, and we'll include that in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for being a guest on this podcast.
Thanks, Adi.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.